All right, this candidate was traumatized by the wars that she was in, quite literally. But we'll get to that after we discuss her really interesting district. Brittany Ramos-DeBarros is joining us. She's running for Congress in New York's 11th district, held by a Republican, a very pro-Trump Republican. What in the world is going on? This story has lots of twists and turns. Brittany was also organizing director for About Face, Veterans Against the War. So Brittany, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no problem. So tons of interesting parts to this. So this used to be a Democratic seat. It was Max Rose who held it. Then he lost to a Republican because he ran as Republican light. And given a choice between a real Republican and a fake Republican, people generally choose real Republicans. So he's running again now. You're running as the progressive alternative to him. Brittany, it got redistricted too, if I understand right. So what is this district now? Is it a Trump district in the middle of New York City or no?
So I would argue that this district has never been a Trump district. It's been an anti-establishment district. And I think that the reality is that, a lot of people from both sides of the aisle have really misunderstood working class people, right? The issue here has been bigger than red or blue, Democrat or Republican. We are a quintessential blue collar district. Staten Island is the most rapidly diversifying county in New York State. And a lot of people have this image of us as Trump country, but this is really worker country. We've seen that with some of the groundbreaking organizing happening with the first Amazon warehouses ever unionizing here, and other incredible fights that are happening right here because people are fed up. They don't care about party. The true majority here are people who feel let down by the system overall, who have checked out, who have kind of given into this hopelessness and disillusionment. And so what I think that we're building here, we are a progressive alternative, but I think we're a people's alternative. We are people who are saying, look, we are the majority. We have had the power, and if we organize and come together, things that people have thought impossible become possible. And it's right within reach. Even before the district lines were expanded, we're waiting on new district lines now, which should be out on Monday and then finalized at the end of next week. But with the district that we had before, the district that Max Rose lost, running to the right, running pro-Trump ads, we had a 2-to-1 majority of registered Democrats, but an 11% turnout in the previous Democratic primary. And so, I think that what that tells me is that people are hungry. We know that policies like Medicare for All are popular at a rate of 70% with the general public, and yet I'm the only person in this race who has the courage to say that that's what we need to invest in, especially after this pandemic that we've just experienced, and we have people getting thrown out in the cold, as we've gone through these layered crises, and I'm the only non-millionaire in this race. And so, I think it's really important that we reframe how we look at a district like mine, and the agenda that we're running on is the popular agenda with the public.
Yes, the old district was Trump won by 10 points. But as you pointed out, the Democrats have a 2-to-1 registration advantage. It is super trippy. And the one other guy who did great in this district was Bernie Sanders. So your point that it's an outsider district that doesn't like the insiders, et cetera, is a great point. And but Brittany, this is part of the problem, right? We can't wait to run in general elections in districts just like this and give them an outsider message that directly appeals to voters that we think they're going to love, right? But the Democratic Party is constantly blocking us. So that leads us to your primary. So before I get into anything else, did you just say Max Rose ran pro-Trump ads against a Republican last time?
Yes, he ran videos saying, literally celebrating the fact that he stood with Trump as if that was a positive thing. He sent out literature celebrating his collaborations with Trump. And I might add, sending out literature demonizing China and promoting this anti-Asian rhetoric that led to spikes in anti-Asian hate crimes that we saw. And so, I think that when people show you who they are, believe them. He lost, and it's no disrespect to him as a person, as a human, but I think that our communities deserve better and are hungry for better. And in this case, better is just a representative who is taking the time to really connect with our communities of all types. We have one of the largest African immigrant communities in Staten Island. There are just so many of us who have been written off, forgotten. We've been the butt of the joke in New York City, and people feel that. People feel that kind of scorn. And we're right here, this kind of true battleground district. And I think that if we can prove that this is the popular agenda here, then that will have powerful ripple effects across the country. And that is really important for a political project over the next several years and really decades to build a government that is not a Republican majority or a Democrat majority, but is a people's majority. And we're seeing that a Democrat majority alone right now with the recent vote to codify Roe v. Wade and make sure that we keep the basics like bodily autonomy and the protection of the right to privacy, which has an impact on so many other protected rights right now. We can't pass that at the point that we can't pass that with a Democratic majority, then we need to start thinking differently. And what I think about is the fact that we need a majority of working class champions who will really fight for the agenda that the people want and see themselves as deeply rooted and accountable to our communities who are suffering right now. And that's what my race is about. I think that that's what our project is about for the next several years. And I think that in order to do that, we have to understand really soberly what we're up against and organize accordingly. There are PACs, APAC, other PACs with billionaires, just funneling millions of dollars to smear people like me and many other progressives around the country who are running right now to back Republicans and Democrats like my opponent who have undermined us and betrayed us time and time again. And when you're a working class candidate like me, that means that you're often going into debt or having to, kind of bend over backwards, even just to be able to run, let alone to raise the kind of money that's necessary to go up against that. But we've done really well. We've raised over 600,000 in grassroots funds. I'm so proud of that without taking a dime of big real estate money, which is a big deal in New York City, or corporate PAC money. But it's gonna take time, and we're still marginalized in the House and certainly in the Senate. We have to get our numbers up. That's gonna take time. And I think that it's gonna take us really getting focused on the idea that I'm sick of making demands. That's why I agreed to run. I'm an organizer. I never thought that I would run. I'm the kind of person who's in the street. Honestly, I didn't really believe in electoral politics as a focal point for a long time. And I know a lot of people feel that way. But what became clear to me is I'm tired of making demands of power. I want the people to be in power. And that means that we have to contest to take political power for the people by running candidates who are truly accountable to the people and committed to that agenda.
So the great news about this is that the press is actually taking Brittany very seriously. Because I say that as great news because normally progressives don't get that treatment. So I think that they got traumatized by missing AOC and Jamal Bowman winning in New York. And Brittany has raised more money than AOC did or Jamal Bowman did. And so it's gotten the attention of the press and they're going, whoa, a progressive might win here. And so, by the way, BrittanyForCongress.org, when somebody is not only doesn't take corporate PAC money, but is being attacked by corporate PAC money, and she's being attacked by millions from corporate PAC money, you gotta help her out. BrittanyForCongress.org, a true progressive in this race. And Brittany, I don't agree with you. I would love to personally insult Max Rose. Anyone running pro-Trump ads in a Democratic area, I mean, I don't care what area it is. If you want to kiss Trump's ass, there's a whole party for it, and it ain't the Democratic Party. And this is a Democratic primary. Let's keep it real, Brittany. The only reason anybody would vote for Max Rose is because they got tricked into it in a Democratic primary by the tons of ads that I'm sure he's running, and probably by Democratic leadership who loves incumbents and loves conservative Trump-loving Democrats.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I knocked doors for him in 2018 because he raised so much money with DCCC support so early. And also, coming from a background with a lot of connections to wealth, that gives a candidate like him a leg up. And, a lot of us said we want to get the Republican out. The previous Republican was also terrible. And, I don't regret that, but I definitely was really disappointed and felt so betrayed as I watched what played out. I never expected him, I understood that he was more centrist than I was even then. But he promised a lot of us in the community that he would stand by Palestinian community that showed up in really powerful numbers to organize him, organize for him, that he would show up for progressives who came from all over New York City, including Park Slope, to invest in this race. He promised us that he would fight for Medicare for all. All of these things. And then, it's one thing if you don't show up to fight for us, but it's another thing to literally go out of your way to stand with a wannabe dictator like Donald Trump. And it's beyond just those ads, voting against passing the War Powers Act the War Powers resolutions repeatedly that, Ro Khanna and others introduced, that were meant to rein in Trump's war powers and simply ensure that he couldn't unilaterally start World War III with Iran when we were teetering on the edge because of an extrajudicial assassination.
Yeah.
That the president at that time, Donald Trump, carried out.
Yeah.
It's wild to me that you have someone, especially as a former captain myself, knowing what's at stake. Lives that are at stake, the environmental destruction. War is the culmination of all violence. Imperialism has dragged us into occupation after occupation, war after war, while our neighbors are rationing their insulin.
Yeah.
And to have someone, especially who is still an officer, who is willing to make votes like that in my mind betray not just the American people, but also people around the world, is just unacceptable. And we don't need to settle for that. And, again, I don't think that this campaign is about me being some kind of savior in contrast, but it's about people power. It's about saying, look, we are the majority already. Working class people in this district who want change are the majority. And when we come together, we can do incredible things. We are the real face of power here.
All right, on the TYT Network, we try to give everybody a voice. And so we were gonna bring on Dylan Brown. He's a progressive activist on disability issues. And so you might not have heard of the top issues that affect the disabled community. And that's why we want to share it with you guys. So let's find out. Dylan, how you doing, brother?
Good, how are you?
Excellent. All right, so Dylan, just first, obviously you're in the disabled community. What are your disabilities?
So I have never gotten a formal diagnosis. I've had multiple visits with neurologists and I've gotten a whole bunch of different diagnoses. Basically, I'm just disabled, almost completely paralyzed from the neck down.
I got you. Okay, so obviously it's personal for you, and so we can understand that. So Dylan, what is a top issue in your mind? Of course, everybody's got different opinions on for the disabled community that you think, man, if we did this, that would be terrific.
Well, okay, speaking just for me, I require basically 24-hour care, if that wasn't obvious. And that care, that kind of irreplaceable care, is tied entirely to Medicaid benefits administered at the state level. They have very stringent income asset requirements. And I think the most important thing would be to do what has been done multiple times already, another expansion of Medicaid to cover the disabled community unconditionally. I mean, that care, unlike most healthcare, which healthcare should be universal, but unlike most healthcare, the benefits that I get through Medicaid are basically irreplaceable.
Yeah. So let me ask about that. How, I mean, this is a very impolite way of putting it, but how little do you have to make to be able to qualify for Medicaid to help you?
So you would think that would be a really clear answer, but it's actually not. I live in New Jersey, and there's a program in New Jersey called Workability that allows you to make more money. How much more money? That's a little unclear because the state website gives a figure, a relatively high figure of about $5,500 a month. But at the county level, it's a completely different matter. And when I called for my eligibility, the county gave me a totally different figure. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was almost, I mean, it was less than half what the state said. And I did some research. Most counties in New Jersey don't list what the income figures are. So you're kind of flying blind. So
they're playing with your life because if you lose that coverage, I literally don't know what you would do. So you got to make.
I don't either.
Yeah, somewhere between the 2,000 to 5,000 a month range. But if you get above that, like let's say you listen to the state and you say, okay, I made 4,000 this year. County could say, hey, you didn't qualify for Medicaid, and then you're in a lot of trouble. So let's understand that. Let's understand that. So what is the care that you need that if you're, like, again, to put it in politely, if you're not poor enough, you wouldn't get?
Yes, so I need help with very rudimentary things that you wouldn't even think about. Getting out of bed, getting dressed in the morning, cutting up food, getting the food to my mouth, showering. I need all of it done for me. I can do a lot, but I can't use my arms or legs. So think about anything you do with your hands. I need somebody to do it for me. And I don't think anybody can say they can go a whole day without ever using their hands.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, especially if we're not in that community, we would be devastated. We wouldn't understand. I mean, we wouldn't know what to do at all, right? And so if they take that away from you, I literally don't know what happens. So what you're asking for is to expand Medicaid so that it covers, it doesn't just cover people making $2,000 to $5,000, but it covers everybody. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument for income requirements for healthcare anyway, but there's even less of an argument for it when the care is quite literally irreplaceable and life-sustaining. So yeah, we've expanded Medicaid twice in American history at least. Once to cover disabled adults between that $2,000 and $5,000 mark, and once when Obamacare passed to cover low-income adults. We can do it a third time. We just have to have the political will to do it.
Yeah, and so this is about this specific issue. If we had, for example, Medicare for all, then you would be covered.
Yes. However, I do have concerns that because the program that I'm under is not directly funded by Medicaid. It is a program that says if you are Medicaid eligible, you are eligible for this. I do have concerns that an improperly or say incomplete view on Medicare for All, an incomplete bill, would accidentally exclude that. I do have that concern, but Medicare for All would go a long way to fixing the problem.
Yeah, and it is the devil's in the details for sure, because there'll be tons of, trading back and forth on provisions, et cetera, and people get left out, and that would be unbelievably unjust. Dylan, it's really interesting because you and I talked off air as well, and you're a wonderful guy, but you weren't always a progressive activist. I mentioned that because you were just talking about the need for Medicaid and stuff. But when you were in the right, did anybody talk about helping people who are disabled or expanding Medicaid or getting everybody health care coverage?
See, no, not unless you asked. What I've found is, even just the normal conservatives I know, they, when asked, one of my previous aides, very hardline conservative, they often said it's completely ridiculous that I can't get healthcare just on the basis of my disability. There are a lot of conservatives who have a very limited view of what aid for poorer Americans should be. But I found that even with the most limited view, most people will say, yeah, the disabled should get it. But you have to ask them. And what I've often also found is, not just on the right, but on the left, everyone will say, oh yeah, we care about that issue. Yeah, we should expand Medicaid for the disabled. And then they move on to the next thing and they never pay it any mind again.
Yeah, it is so hard to get people to focus and prioritize this issue. So, in terms of your activism, now you gotta, on top of everything else, be like the world's greatest activist to win on this issue. Yeah, now look, now we open up a can of worms because people are gonna wonder, like, you were on the right. So you had an interesting story as to what led you there. So yeah, how'd you get there?
So the thing that led me there was also the thing that led me out. It was seeing one thing and being told that another thing was happening. I got into politics because of the Edward Snowden leaks, and I was confused and in disbelief at how the media just kind of went, no, that's not what happened. James Clapper didn't lie in a Senate hearing. Them spying on you is okay. No, of course it's not. It's blatantly unconstitutional. James Clapper did lie. Those are facts. You can't say that didn't happen when I can see it right in front of me. And ironically, that's also the thing that led me out. I saw a lot of people on the right when Trump came down that escalator and he said what he said about Mexican immigrants. They said, he didn't say that. No, he did. I can hear it. He's not mincing words. He's not clever enough for that. So it was just kind of, I'm okay with almost anyone of any political persuasion as long as they're open-minded and intellectually honest. I like talking to people I don't agree with. I think it's a lot of fun, but I have no patience for people who tell me don't believe your lying eyes.
Yeah, you know what? I might start calling that the Dylan standard. Like, it's such a simple standard.
It is.
Yeah, don't tell me that what I'm seeing isn't true, because I have eyes, I have ears, I can tell, And so that, Dylan, that's kind of pretty confirming for me, because as people who watch the show know, I think that mainstream media drove a lot of people to the right wing by constantly lying to them. Oh, politicians are not affected by millions of dollars that they get from lobbyists and PACs and stuff. Politicians are honorable, decent people. I mean, there's tons and tons of lies that they tell you. So, but what's interesting, okay, so you saw the lies and then you went looking for, well, that isn't true. Let me look for something that is true. How did you come upon the right wing first? Like, did you consider everything, or did something lead you to the right wing?
Well, I was fairly single-minded in that I was interested in learning more about Snowden and the leaks and privacy violations. And what I found at the time was that the people on the left that I was encountering weren't mad about it. They thought it was fine because it was their guy. Look, I didn't do as much research as I probably should have.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. No,
We'll see. Poor
Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby.
You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it. We will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good bosser.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. All right, welcome to Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Kasparyan with you guys. Unfortunately, I like to start Mondays happy and festive, but we have tragic news as usual. Okay, Anna, take it away.
We begin with that tragic news from the weekend.
Officials say that Peyton Gendron, a white 18-year-old man, was wearing body armor and military-style clothing when he pulled up yesterday at the Tops Friendly Market and began shooting. He picked that spot specifically for its demographics, according to officials. They say he drove for more than 200 miles away to carry out the attack in an area that had a significant black population.
10 people were killed and 2 others injured after an 18-year-old racially motivated mass shooter opened fire at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Now, the total number of people shot was 13, and 11 of those 13 people were black. And I say that it was a racist shooter because after he was identified, there was news of his so-called manifesto. And I read all 180 pages, and it's not vague. It doesn't hint at racism. The manifesto makes it abundantly clear that this 18-year-old shooter specifically targeted a supermarket 200 miles away, knowing full well that this was a predominantly black area, and opened fire with the specific purpose of shooting and killing black individuals. In fact, he streamed this horrific and tragic shooting on Twitch before Twitch took it down. And in the video, you can see him pointing the gun at a white man who's like cowering down in fear. He apologizes to that man and then continues the massacre. So he was very clearly targeting black people. His manifesto makes it clear that that was his intent. And we have a lot more details to get to, including the weapon he used and how he illegally modified it. But Cenk, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, so we have to clarify things that are super obvious because everything is debated in America and everything is turned into lies. So the guy writes a 180-page manifesto about racism and countdown to the right wing saying, no, he wasn't racist. No, it's not a big deal. Yes, everyone should have these kind of weapons. Yes, that's called freedom. Yes, the idea of great replacement theory is also freedom, and that is, and no, it's not racist. No, the great replacement theory, which is what he believed in, is that white people are going to be replaced by non-white people. It is by definition racist. So, by the way, if that were to quote unquote happen, what would be the harm if everyone is equal? No, they think white people are superior and from time to time should murder black people. And that's what happened in Buffalo.
Not time to time. I mean, his ideology, along with the ideology of other white supremacists who subscribe to the conspiracy theory of white replacement, they want to essentially purge the country of all non-whites. Deport people, murder people, whatever it takes to essentially establish a white ethno-state. And they're very transparent and clear about that. And if you think that this is some crazy conspiracy theory in the dark corners of the internet, you would be mistaken, because we have prominent Republican politicians who spew this nonsense garbage, and we have prominent cable show hosts like Tucker Carlson who do the same. We'll get to him later in the show. But first, a few more details about what happened during the shooting. There was one hero in that supermarket, a security, an ex-cop, and also a security guard who was armed. He tried to stop the shooter, but the shooter was wearing tactical gear and body armor. So it looked like a good person, good guy with a gun. Just wasn't enough to stop this heinous act of violence, extreme violence. So I wanna go to this next video that gives you more on what happened with the security guard. Let's watch.
Among those killed, 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, described by her son as a mother to the motherless. Pearlie Young, age 77, who ran a food pantry for 25 years. And Aaron Salter Jr., a retired police officer and longtime supermarket security guard, called a hero for trying to take down the assailant. 10 of the 13 people shot were black.
This individual came here with the expressed purpose of taking as many black lives as he possibly could.
The suspect, Peyton Gendron, was arraigned hours after the shooting. He pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Officials say the alleged gunman drove to Buffalo from his hometown 200 miles away and live streamed the attack online. Eyewitnesses say they watched him shoot 4 people outside the store, then continue the attack inside.
I heard at least 20 shots in store.
He then put a gun to his neck, but officials say police officers convinced him to drop it.
Police officers convinced him to drop it, which, good. I would much rather him see his day in court than have the cops do extrajudicial killings. But notice the difference between how cops tend to treat white mass shooters versus unarmed black individuals around the country. But that's beside the point, I guess. I just wanted to honor Aaron Salter for having the courage to try to save people's lives and defend people's lives as this mass shooter was carrying out this terrible crime, this terrible act. He was using a Bushmaster XM15 rifle. He purchased it legally, the shooter did. The shooter purchased it legally. But he made illegal modifications to the weapon so it would have a high capacity magazine capability. I should also note that he legally purchased that gun after his school had called state troopers on him because he had threatened to do a murder-suicide. This was a year prior to the shooting. So authorities apparently showed up to the scene. He went through mental evaluations. Eventually, they left it alone. Didn't think he posed any type of threat. And as you can imagine, soon after that, within a year, he bought the weapon that he would then use in this mass shooting. And he also posted his manifesto online a few days prior to carrying out this mass shooting. And it really makes you wonder, do we have anyone looking into these issues? I mean, you hear about all this indiscriminate spying into American people who haven't done anything wrong. There are all these giant red flags, Cenk, including the school calling the cops on him because he was threatening a murder-suicide. But he's able to legally purchase a gun. He's able to post his disgusting racist manifesto where he justifies killing children as well, by the way. No one notices it, no one cares. Like, is the FBI not on these message boards, whether it's 4chan or Reddit? Like, what are they doing?
No, but let's be very clear about this. Nobody else will talk about this because they find it deeply impolite, against their business interests, etc., to criticize the right wing in factual ways. The right wing protected this shooter in every possible way before the shooting. So in other countries, when they find out that this guy had already been talked to by the police about how he had publicly announced that he was going to murder people, and then we allowed him to buy any kind of weapons he wants, they won't believe it. They can't believe it. What kind of a government doesn't protect its own citizens? What you have to understand is our right wing here in America celebrates this kind of stuff. So they're like, you cannot touch his weapons. Even if he says he's going to murder you, you cannot touch his weapons. His weapons in America are holy. Your children, your family members are not. They're not at all important. Their lives are not at all important to the right wing at all. But that weapon, they pray to it. So we literally could not stop that guy from buying a weapon because of the right wing. And that's a fact, and everybody knows that. In fact, the right wing celebrates that. In fact, they'll watch this video and go, can you believe these guys are using this as an excuse just because those weapons are used to do massacre after massacre after massacre, a lot of which are purposely racial. There's a lot more where this came from, El Paso, Texas, let alone in other countries like Christchurch, New Zealand, let alone the shooting at the temple in Pittsburgh in 2018, which was also about the great replacement theory. The right wing goes, hey, that's our freedom. Well, how about those people at the temple? Did they have freedom to live? How about those people in Buffalo that died? The 11 people that were shot at, 13 people that were shot at, 10 that died. Did they have freedom? No, according to the right wing, they have no freedom at all. Only the weapons does. But it's not just the weapons. When he publishes a manifesto that Anna talked about, couple of days before the shooting, online, there's nothing we can do. The right wing says, freedom of speech, freedom to murder your children and talk about it and brag about it. And you are not allowed to touch that poor angel. Guys, if the authorities in America tried to stop that shooter the day before he did the shooting, the right wing would howl in this country and they would declare him a freedom of speech martyr, poor man in Buffalo, just because he wanted to murder black babies. They're taking his freedom of speech away, they're taking his guns away. Outrageous, they would say. So that is why we have nonstop massacres and ones that are deeply racial in this country, because the right wing protects them.
The right wing protects them, and I do think that there needs to be a real discussion in regard to how the media should cover these stories, because I think that most media, with the exception of like extreme right-wing outlets, they have the best intentions in that they do their best to kind of like hide the manifesto, to hide, but when you do that, it opens up an opportunity for the right-wingers who want to provide cover to do just that. And basically push out all these narratives that kind of muck up what the real motives were. And there is no mistaking what his motives were. He made sure that he was very clear in his manifesto, specifically mentioned that he does not have a mental illness, specifically talked about how he thinks that the replacement of white people in America is orchestrated by Jewish people. So it was anti-Semitic, it was anti-black, and it was full of paranoia and just a lot of, honestly, the garbage that we hear from Tucker Carlson during his primetime Fox News show. And so I want to get to the manifesto now, because I think it's worth talking about it so everyone's clear about what the motives were. So when you come across Glenn Greenwald, you know exactly what he's doing in trying to provide cover for white supremacists who just murdered 10 people and injured 3 others in this mass shooting.
I just want to say 2 last things before you go to that. One is, no, the thing that you mentioned is an aside, that he's still alive, the cops didn't shoot him. A lot of our members are writing in, and I totally agree with them. We just showed a story of a Latina grandmother, 75 years old, who has dementia. Her family called in the cops, and the cops came in. She's away from them, might or might not have a knife, and they just shot her dead because she would pose a threat. Latinas, black people, no matter how young they are, 12-year-old Tamir Rice, no matter how old they are, 75-year-old Latina that we covered the other day, they get shot, and almost always instantly. But you go murder 10 people, oh, it's a black part of town and a white guy did it. Whoa, let's be super gentle and wrap him in bubble wrap. I don't think they should have shot him. But can you also please stop shooting black people if you're cops? How about trying to protect all of us? I know you've sworn to the right wing that you will never protect us from their guns and from their hatred. Can you then stop murdering our citizens along the way? So which leads me to the last point. Roberta Drury was one of the victims here, and she was not from Buffalo. She came in from out of town because her brother was getting a bone marrow transplant. And she went to Tops to cook a special dinner that night for her brother and her family. And she was murdered that day. And I want you to keep her in mind, as you will now see for weeks on end, the right wing beginning to defend not necessarily the killer, although sometimes they will, but his rights to do the things that he did, his right to be racist, his right to say over the top horrible things about other races, his right to be concerned about being replaced, his right to have those deadly weapons so he can kill lots of black people at the same time, and yes, Jews too. They always come back to, oh, it's the Jews that are spearheading the replacement of white people in America. And remember that deep anti-Semitism, and remember that hatred as you see that right wing go to protect him now after the fact.
All right, let's get to his manifesto and what it said. The Buffalo shooter who shot and killed 10 individuals in a supermarket in Buffalo, all of them African Americans, and he also injured 3 others. He left a manifesto that made it clear that he intended to drive 200 miles away from the town that he lives in order to carry out this violent act. And he made it clear that he's doing it because he believes that minorities and black people are here to replace white people like him, and he needs to do something about it. And so there's a lot that you might see online with right-wingers trying to provide cover for this guy, but I wanna make sure you don't fall victim to their disinformation, because I read all 180 pages of his manifesto, and I wanna share some of the excerpts from it. I thought this part was telling. He wrote, quote, I started browsing 4chan in May of 2020 after extreme boredom. Remember, this was during the outbreak of COVID. There, I learned through infographics and memes that the white race is dying out and that the Jews and the elite were behind this. Okay, so let's pause for a second. You can find, it's archived, but you can find his social media posts prior to getting radicalized by these message boards online. And he was, by all counts, a normal guy, a normal kid, okay? Took COVID seriously. In one reply on Twitter, he asked someone like, why would you even risk someone else's life by not following the guidelines? I'm paraphrasing, but he's essentially saying stuff like that. I give you those details because it shows you just how quickly a seemingly normal individual can be rapidly radicalized by these platforms, by these message boards, places like 4chan. But let me give you more details on what he said his intentions were. He did this portion of the manifesto where he answers questions that people might have about his motives and why he carried out this violent act. Why did you decide to carry out the attack? I carried out the attack to show to the replacers that as long as the white man lives, our land will never be theirs and they will never be safe from us. To directly reduce immigration rates to European lands by intimidating and physically removing the replacers themselves, to intimidate the replacers already living on our lands to emigrate back to their home countries. Let me read one more graphic. He also says his intentions are to agitate the political enemies of my people into action, to cause them to overextend their own hand and experience the eventual and inevitable backlash as a result, to incite violence, retaliation, and further divide between the European people and the replacers currently occupying European soil. Let's just note how, the guy, he mentions Native Americans briefly in the manifesto, but his argument is, yeah, but white people have been here for a long time. And so as a result, this is a white country. This should be this belongs to us. So totally excusing what white settlers did in America, the brutality, the barbarism toward Native Americans, not a big deal, right? It's okay when we're the replacers. And we've been here for so long that this is our land. That's the kind of mentality he had, and it's the garbage that he reads on these message boards.
Yeah, so for guys, the scariest part of this is now nearly half of Republican voters say that they believe in great replacement theory.
Yep.
So it's some strongly believe in it, others somewhat believe in it. The Jews are somewhat replacing us with Latinos and blacks, goes the theory, right? By the way, I say the Jews because not only did he talk about it in his manifesto over and over, it is a connecting theme in all of these shooters. So the Pittsburgh shooter that shot up a synagogue also talked about how the Jews were replacing white people in the country. And this goes all the way back, of course, to the Nazis who chanted, "The Jews will not replace us." Yes, that's the chant that they then chanted in Charlottesville, the Nazi right wing here in America. And so it all connects, and it is all connected to the great replacement theory. That is, and in fact, this particular shooter in Buffalo explained in his manifesto, he said that almost the same exact thing that the shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand did. Remember that mass shooting where he killed dozens of Muslims? He blamed the puppet master as being Angela Merkel, at the time the leader of Germany. This guy took out Merkel and put in George Soros. Same exact words except for Soros, the Jewish puppet master that is looking to replace us. One of the questions that I have is, replace us for what? Like nobody ever talks about that. And a lot of Republicans, because now tons of Republicans, including the number 3 Republican in the House, at least Stefanik, are defending the replacement theory. But what are you guys worried is going to be replaced? So if you said to me, somebody's gonna replace you, I'd say, where? To do what, right?
Well,
the assumption is they're gonna replace us in having power in this country.
Yes.
And so, Anna, I just wanna point out the super obvious, because right-wing media will defend the replacement theory and mainstream media will go, I can't tell anything, I don't know anything about news, I'll call it 50-50. They'll be outraged at this, right? But when you say it's obviously racist, the great replacement theory, a lot of them will get skittish because now nearly half of Republicans believe it, right? And guys, if you say only white people should hold power, and oh my God, the Latinos or the black people or Jews, etc., are going to replace us in having power, that is by definition racist.
But do you know why they think that that's a bad thing, other than they believe that they would lose power? They're concerned that once they're the minority, in terms of numbers, obviously, well then people of color are gonna be as vicious to us as we've been to them.
Yeah, 100%, Anna, and we've talked about that on the show before, but I wanna make a very important clarification. It's projection, because left-wing white people don't think, oh my God, what if a Latino were to replace me in power? They don't think that at all. They think, well, what difference does it make? Okay, I was a councilman and now that black lady over there is a councilman. What difference does it make, right? But because they actually believe in equality. But white right-wingers, they think, no, I love oppressing you, and I assume that having power means I get to oppress you and you can't do a goddamn thing about it, and I love acting superior to you. And so they assume that when minorities get the power, that they're going to do the same to them. Well, good news for you, evil right-wingers. We're not anywhere near as evil as you guys. In fact, we're not at all evil. In fact, we want you to be equal to everyone else. But I know that's the thing that bothers you the most. That's the whole point of great replacement theory. They don't want to be equal.
A few more things I want to mention from his manifesto before we wrap this up. He also, in the Q&A portion of his manifesto, asks, was the attack anti-immigration in origin? And he says, yes, beyond all doubt, anti-immigration, anti-ethnic replacement, and anti-cultural replacement. By the way, if I recall correctly, the right wing loves to talk about how black people are allegedly culturally violent. It's an interesting accusation to make when most of the mass shooters in this country have been young white males. Now, do I think that this is a cultural characteristic of white people in America? No, I don't think that. But I do think that it's fascinating that we see projection among right wingers in like every facet of life, whether it has to do with sexual identity, whether it has to do with projections on violence. It's just, you see it happen and play out over and over again. He also justifies, by the way, killing children. I want to go to the last graphic here because it gives you an idea of how depraved and disgusting this person is. Children of replacers, because he asks, is it okay to kill children? Like, why are we killing children? You know, they're innocent. He says, children of replacers do not stay children. They become adults and reproduce, creating more replacers to replace your people. They grow up and vote against your people's own wishes for the interests of their own people and identity. They grow up and take the potential homes of your people for themselves. They occupy positions of power, remove wealth, and destroy social trust. Just an unbelievable way of thinking. And look, I think all of what we're experiencing politically in the country right now is intertwined. Because which political group is taking freedom and liberty away from women by not allowing them to make medical decisions about their own bodies? It's the right wing, which, as Cenk mentioned earlier, is now dominated by this ideology where you have more than half of Republican voters believing in this nonsense conspiracy theory of white replacement. And so I think that the plan here is to purge the country, in their minds. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion, but in their minds, purge the country of anyone who's not white and then basically force white women to reproduce, right? To bulk up the numbers of white people in America.
Yeah, and have white men be completely in charge, like they would say, the good old days when we had slaves and women couldn't vote and they were chattel to be used in our households and no other minority had rights at all and we would bar people like Asians. It goes on and on. And so look, does white culture in America have a problem with violence? No, I think that's too broad. Problem with racism, obviously this country has a problem with racism overall. But if you get more specific and ideological and not base it on race, does the right wing in this country have a history of racism? Well, not just a history, right now, there's no question about it. They celebrate racism all the time, all the time. Their whole cry about freedom of speech, we have disproven it hundreds of times on this show. They do not want to protect any other speech other than racist speech. And do they have a history? Do they have a culture in the right wing in this country of violence? Hell yeah, they do. They overwhelming celebration of violence. And now 40% of Republicans say that it might be time for political violence. Hey, 40% of Republicans, congratulations. You got the violence you were looking for. Are you happy now?
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah.
They've been craving a race war, and like I have no doubt in my mind that there are right wingers in this country who saw that mass shooting and thought this is exactly what needs to happen. Because, and by the way, let's just be clear about one other thing. This is not a lone wolf, okay? Let's stop pretending like, oh, this is a one-off. No, we don't have a problem in the country. We absolutely do have a problem. This isn't just something that permeates or exists in the dark corners of the internet. This is something that has become mainstream, this ideology, through programming over at Fox News, through the campaigning that we see from Elise Stefanik, Republican lawmaker from New York, Matt Gaetz. We'll provide all those receipts on the show in a little bit. But this is a problem. It is an identity. It's part of America's identity. It's part of our history. When you really look at the prevalence of right-wing extremism in America, the violence against people of color in America, we gotta be real about that. And we gotta be real about how people are getting radicalized and have a real conversation about how to mitigate that. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep running around in the same circle over and over and over again. And I'm afraid that that's exactly what's gonna happen in the aftermath of this tragic event. All right, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, Glenn Greenwald, of course, jumping in, connecting back to his roots of defending Nazis to defend this guy. We've got this story and more when we come back.
All right, guys, huge elections tomorrow. Make sure you tune in for our coverage. We got Pennsylvania. Man, Fetterman had a 30-point lead, but just had a stroke. The luck of progressives is unreal, okay? So most of it is not luck, but this one was a bad break. It doesn't matter, he's still gonna win, he's fine. But now all of a sudden that race is close, and there's tons of close races, including Jamie McLeod Skinner versus Kurt Schrader in Oregon. That's Kentucky, you got North Carolina, you got all, it's a huge coverage tomorrow night. It starts at 8 o'clock Eastern right here, don't miss it. We have got to get some progressives into Congress, and so that would be a huge first step. Remember, if Fetterman wins, he's gonna go up against Dr. Oz as one of the other ghouls in the Pennsylvania Senate race on the Republican side. So that's gonna be epic. All right, so member comments. Theater Goddess writes in, whenever Bart's pre-show music is calming rather than trying to hype us up, I know it's gonna be a bad news day. Thanks for trying to keep us and your coworkers calm. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular says, still surprised the newscaster called a white terrorist an 18-year-old man. Every other time the white terrorist will be called a boy or youth, even into their late 20s. Meanwhile, 10 or 12-year-old black children are called giant young men. There's more on that in a second. Jesse Anti-Racist wrote in, most of what the shooter's so-called manifesto was not even his own thoughts. The shooter copied and pasted from different racist mass shooters from the past several years, including the graphs that it contained. That's true, and it's relevant because they're all copying each other. This is a culture, this is not a lone wolf. RFK says, what most do not think is that the great replacement theory does not stop at non-white people. It also includes whites who are liberal, Jewish, and Catholic too. Anyone who disagrees with them, totally true. Al Belso says, I agree with Anna, there's a double standard. Had that shooter looked brown, I'm 110% sure the police would have shot him immediately. There's almost no question about that. They wouldn't have hesitated for a second to put him down. Sina Hogaboom says, white wing or right wing, same difference. Eileen says, Buffalo shooter's a teenager, Tamir Rice is a young adult thug. And so we're tired of it, and it happens all the time. By the way, who do you think put the racist thoughts into everybody's heads over these last 50 years? I'm not talking about Civil War, I'm not even talking about Jim Crow. Over the last 50 years, who put the racist thoughts in everybody's head? It was the media. The media is where we get our information. They showed you black people as criminals, criminals, criminals over and over and over again. There was way more white criminals, but they didn't show you that because it didn't get racist from scared white right-wingers. So they poisoned this country. That's why it's in everybody's heads. All right, we'll be back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Let's keep going. Unfortunately, there's a lot of news here.
Tucker Carlson has many apologists, and unfortunately, Glenn Greenwald, who's a regular on his program, happens to be one of them. Now, the Buffalo shooter who gunned down 10 innocent individuals and injured 3 others at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, believed in white replacement theory, the idea that people of color and immigrants are coming into the country and having a lot of kids to replace white people. And one of the individuals who spews that garbage on his show on a regular basis is Tucker Carlson. Now, to run interference for Tucker Carlson is Glenn Greenwald with this statement. There are fundamental and glaring differences between the animating views of the New Zealand and Buffalo shooters and Fox hosts. But even if there weren't, exploiting corpses as they still lie on the ground for mob justice is ghoulish, soulless, and sick, he argues.
You're ghoulish, soulless, and sick.
100%.
You want to distract from people, Glenn, when they're actually mad and want to do something about it. Say, let's come back to it 2 days or 2 weeks later, full well knowing, Glenn, that they're not going to come back to it, and your mission is going to be accomplished, which is shh.
Exactly.
Racist white right-wing culture is awesome, right, Glenn? Freedom of speech, go get him, big guy. That's what you goddamn think. And that's why you say, no, when we're guilty, shush, 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 shush. And all of a sudden he brings back a shooter, the one shooter from the left, and talks about it for page after page after page. Because remember, the dozens of right-wing murderers in the country that are mass shooters, the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, El Paso, Texas, when they shot Latinos, almost all about the great replacement theory. But shh, Glenn doesn't want you talking about that. Talk about the one left-wing shooter. Distraction, squirrel. I gotta protect my beloved Tucker Carlson. That's how I make money. You're pathetic, Glenn, pathetic.
He's just, Cenk, he's just going back to his roots of defending Nazis. Which is exactly what he did as a lawyer for Matthew Hale, a Nazi. That's what he does. And he had a brief moment of clarity in his life. Maybe he decided, let me go toward wanting to protect people's civil liberties through the reporting I do. But that wasn't really who he was, right? He decided to go right back into the defending Nazis category with his work. Now, I want to read you also from his Substack, but before I do, I want to also note the very first thing Glenn Greenwald did on Twitter after the shooting happened was go after the New York Times because they made a small error in regard to the shooter liking crypto. Turns out the shooter didn't like crypto. He was actually very critical of crypto. Who cares? Who cares? It is such an obvious squirrel meant to distract you. And then later he comes out with this Substack piece where he writes that Carlson was primarily responsible for the 10 dead people in Buffalo was asserted despite the fact that there was no indication that the shooter even knew who Carlson was, that he had ever watched his show, that he was influenced by him in any way, or that he admired or even liked the Fox host. Indeed, in the long list of people and places which Gendron, that's the shooter, cited as important influences on him, Brenton Tarrant, the El Paso shooter, Patrick Crusius, the California Jewish Community Center killer, John Ernest, the Norwegian mass murderer, Anders Breivik, the Charleston. No, that's wrong.
No, it's not wrong. Charleston Black Church murderer, Dylan Roof, etc.
Right. Yeah, so he names all these other people who were named, by the way, in the shooter's manifesto. Anyway, but look, the point here is Tucker Carlson has taken white replacement theory, which primarily existed in the dark corners of the internet, and he brought it mainstream, took it mainstream with his primetime news show on Fox. He knows that, but he wants to provide cover for him. And so I don't know, maybe Glenn Greenwald is really dumb, or maybe he's super unaware of what Tucker Carlson talks about on his show on a regular basis. So let's remind him. Let's take a look at this video.
I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true. We've never seen demographic change like this. It's roughly the equivalent of a brand new city of Chicago every year. A city populated entirely by poor people with limited education who can't speak English. And the question is, how is it good for America? Where exactly is all this criminal white supremacy, this right-wing domestic terrorism that poses, quote, the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland? Where is it? Well, of course, it doesn't exist. In other words, you're being replaced and there's nothing you can do about it. So shut up. The great replacement theory, it's a lie, they yelled. George Soros has nothing to do with that. Stop talking. They said we were espousing something called the great replacement theory, a well-known racist fantasy, the great replacement. They acknowledge that it's real and they love it. This policy is called the great replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. The great replacement plan is working.
But Jake, the shooter didn't mention Tucker Carlson by name in his manifesto, therefore innocent, totally innocent.
No reasonable human being that was objective would look at what Tucker Carlson has said, read the 180-page manifesto, and come back and say, the number one problem is New York Times had a typo and there was a left-wing shooter 5 years ago. No, but wait, why are we talking about that? This guy just did the shooting today. You say we shouldn't talk about the shooting that happened today, but we should talk about a shooting that happened 5 years ago and some tiny little error of the New York Times. Glenn, it's super obvious to anyone with 2 brain cells that you're trying to distract people. Then the question is, why? Why are you trying to distract them from Tucker Carlson constantly talking about the great replacement theory? Listen to the things that Tucker Carlson said in just that clip. He talked about how these nefarious forces, including George Soros, want to replace Americans with, quote, more obedient voters from the third world. Why would they be more obedient? More obedient to who? What would be the problem with whether it's an immigrant from the Scandinavian countries or the Baltic countries or the African countries or the Asian countries coming here? And if we're all equal and you believe in the most core principle of America, of equality, you would think, who cares if an Asian guy is voting or a Latina lady or a white guy? What difference does it make? But apparently it makes a big difference to Tucker Carlson. That's why he keeps talking about it. And in 1965, there was a law that was repealed, and that law said that only people basically from Europe could immigrate here. And Tucker Carlson said that was the worst thing that ever happened. Glenn, why was it the worst thing that ever happened where we allowed people from other countries that are non-white to immigrate here? That's what Tucker Carlson says.
He referred to it as the worst attack on the country in 160 years, and he was specifically referring to an act that was meant to replace the national origin formula. The national origin formula limited immigration into the United States to white people and white people only. And when that was changed through a later act, that is what Tucker Carlson refers to as the worst attack on the country in 60 years.
No, but that is deeply and obviously and blatantly racist. Okay. To say, oh my God, we're gonna allow immigration from non-white people? We're gonna allow that? That is an attack on America because they do not view America as black people or Latinos or Jews or Muslims. They view America as white. That is the definition of racism. Tucker Carlson said it endless times on his show. And the shooters in El Paso and all the other places that Glenn himself even quoted, all talk about the replacement theory, or almost all talk about it. And in almost the same ways that Tucker Carlson talks about it. But somehow Glenn thinks objectively, oh, I can't see it. I can only see things that happened 5 years ago and from people that I disagree with politically. But when it's my main benefactor, then I can't see, I'm blind. And the reason we get more upset at Glenn is because he's not an idiot. And what makes it sad is how deeply morally odious he is. He's a corrupt, despicable person. And so, look, he talks about, the shooter does, and you saw it in that Tucker Carlson clip, about how Soros is leading the replacement of people. Soros is Jewish. It is a deeply anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Glenn is Jewish, but he doesn't care. He's a fame whore. On Matt Hale that Anna talked about, the original Nazi that Glenn made his name defending, he was not a court-appointed lawyer. The original lawyer for Matt Hale was another fame whore, Alan Dershowitz. It was like, oh, it'll seem really interesting and different, and I'll make all the papers if I'm a Jewish lawyer defending a Nazi.
But Dershowitz was too expensive for Matthew Hale, so he had to find like a low-rent lawyer.
Yeah, and low-rent lawyer Glenn Greenwald then jumped in and said, I'd like to be famous. I'd like to be famous. I'll defend the Nazi. Glenn, you're right back at it. Congratulations.
And finally, one more piece of evidence for Glenn or anyone who's been duped by Glenn. Why don't we hear from a proudly self-described white nationalist and what he thinks about Tucker Carlson and his rhetoric on his show? Let's watch.
When Tucker says population replacement is a voting rights issue, there are young people that go, yep, yes, that's so true, it is. Right before I went live on my show, I watched a clip from Tucker Carlson's show. And I noticed that Tucker Carlson was saying the exact same thing that I said last night. And that's okay. And in the spirit of America first, and we've got to get used to saying this, I saw that monologue and I said, okay. So, my talking points, I guess, are now mainstream enough that they're on Fox News.
Mainstream enough that they're now on Fox News. And that's exactly what Tucker Carlson has managed to do, along with Republican politicians like Elise Stefanik and also Matt Gaetz.
To this day, I believe that Glenn Greenwald is still pretending to be a progressive.
Yeah.
And by the way, the morons, the blithering idiots of the right wing are like, oh no, it's true. Oh, progressives are always defending white supremacists like Tucker Carlson, talking about how these dirty immigrants are gonna replace us beloved pure white people. That's what progressives do, right? No progressive does that. He's a total whore for the right wing. He makes money from you guys, and he's like, yes, money from the right wing. No. I don't see great replacement theory. Tucker's only said it a couple dozen times. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. All these shooters are all talking about the same exact theory. I don't see it. Oh, really, Glenn, you can't see it? No, the most disgusting part is that it's obvious that you do see it, and you're trying to trick everyone else into pretending that someone on the left wing sees, oh, you poor right wingers, your culture of violence is so beautiful. Your culture of racism is gorgeous. Oh, you're the victims. You're the poor victims. Look at the New York Times, they got a slight fact wrong. It's their fault, not your fault. Guys, this is just the beginning. They're gonna go on a warpath over the next couple of weeks. They're gonna let this cool down for a couple of days. And then they're gonna say the Democrats are overreacting. In fact, he wrote it in the manifesto, the 18-year-old kid did, okay? He said it's gonna be great because we're gonna say that the Democrats are overreacting, and then we'll do even more pushback in our direction, and we'll get even more power. He wrote it in the manifesto, and you will see it play out on Fox News on a nightly basis. When we say, hey, can we, at least for God's sake, track people who say, I am going to murder people, can we at least have police talk to them? And they're gonna say, oh my God, we're the victims. We're the victims just because we want to murder minorities, just because we want to murder people that aren't the same race or ideology as us. We're being tracked, we're the victims. No, those dead people are the victims. And you guys are at fault. Oh, you don't like that, Glenn? Cry, I don't care, go make your money. Piece of crap, go dance for them.
Yeah, he will. He will. He loves dancing for them. He's got a long history of dancing for them. It's garbage. Anyway, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including what elected lawmakers have to say about the shooting. We'll be right back.
Back on social break here. Stephen Scales says there are a few things more dangerous than a white man who feels that they're being marginalized. But it has to be specifically a white right-wing man. Okay, left-wingers don't have any problem with other races. They help someone you don't know, etc. Right? No, it's the ideology, it's the cult and the culture of racist, violent right-wing. Okay, and they prove it in the polling. There's no question that right-wing is more violent and way more racist. Way more racist. Anyone denying that is an obvious effing liar. Hapless Harry says, I know you don't have time today, but we had another racially motivated shooting in Laguna Woods. Sorry. That was my immigrant self coming out, pronouncing the W's as V's. One person died, I think 5 people were wounded. One that was killed, the doctor tackled the guy, preventing him from killing many, many people.
They hogtied him until the authorities came.
Yeah, and guys, the thing is, it's the brown shirts. And unfortunately, one part of the manifesto is, I'm worried, is correct. When he says, we're just gonna intimidate them. We're just gonna do nonstop violence until they don't speak up. That's what the brown shirts in Germany did. That's what they're doing right now. And their defenders can't wait to help them. People like Glenn Greenwald. R. Stone says, what's clear to me is that the CRT that is problematic, critical race theory, isn't what was being taught in graduate school, but what's being instructed on Fox News and peddled by the NRA, but please keep banning those math books. Yeah, the right wing talks nonstop about race while pretending the left wing is talking about race. Jam says, boy, I'm not playing. I don't want to hear Tucker's voice right now. Tucker slept like a baby after every one of these great replacement shootings. So did Glenn's sellout Greenwald. Just be anti-racist says, notice how Tucker Carlson went from saying the great replacement theory to the replacement plan. Words matter, of course. And every time they mention Soros, they don't mean, hey, he's another random donor. They mean, look at the Jews, okay? Get off my grump writes in on Twitch. Thank you, TYT, for informing me. The whole country should be outraged at the lack of representation that the people truly have. I've never donated to any politician, but I'm now a Wolfpack member and a Rebellion Pack donor. Keep up the good fight, Ching. I appreciate it. We got to fight back, and then on our terms, not by giving to scummy politicians, including corporate Democrats who do nothing but rob you. Needle Riot said, too strong. Thank you for keeping me sane on this insane world. Pearl Drop wrote in, God, it's been such a dumpster fire 2 weeks. The COVID bug finally got my family, and it was miserable, guys. And this was after being double vaxxed and boosted and all the time. And no John today on TDR, but you were a bonus, Anna, and your hair looks great. Okay.
Thank you.
And Anna got it twice. I mean, the dumpster fire keeps going. Anyway.
Wait, what?
No, the COVID.
Oh, COVID. Okay, yeah, I thought you meant nice comments. I'm like, what the hell?
No,
That's mean.
We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. More news.
Arizona State Senator Wendy Rogers, a member of the Oath Keepers who also appeared in Nick Fuentes' white nationalist America First PAC conference, has pushed a conspiracy in regard to the Buffalo shooting. The shooter in that case was fueled by racism and a belief in white replacement theory. So he showed up to a predominantly black neighborhood and shot and killed 10 black individuals and also injured 3 others in this mass shooting. Now, what did Wendy Rogers, a white nationalist herself, have to say about it? Well, she posted on social media, Fed Boy Summer has started in Buffalo, taking a page out of Alex Jones's book to push this theory that it was a false flag. She's an elected lawmaker in the state of Arizona. She is a state senator in Arizona. And if you think she's the only unhinged right-wing lawmaker in the country, you'd be mistaken, because on a federal level, we have others who are just openly pushing the racist white replacement theory. And we'll get to them in just a second. Cenk.
Yeah, she's also deeply anti-Semitic, and so is the Great Replacement Theory. She has posted several anti-Semitic memes before, including when they were attacking CPAC, which is a massively right-wing organization, but they think it's not racist and right-wing enough, and so in it they put a Star of David on it. She's talking about George Soros, like Tucker Carlson does, like the shooter in Buffalo did. Oh, the guy who's actually controlling things and looking to replace us. And then has all these conspiracies because he's the puppet master. It is the oldest libel there is, and it's directed at the so-called Jews who control us. She's deeply anti-Semitic, deeply racist. And by the way, if she's reelected, so is all of her constituents. Not all, but the ones that voted for her are saying, yes, I like this anti-Semitism. I like a lunatic representing me because I'm just as stupid and crazy as she is. And by the way, if you look at the polling on the Republican side, it's a giant chunk of them. We'll talk about that in a second, because it's what's driving these politicians Anna's about to tell you about.
So she has in the past retweeted a push to celebrate Confederate generals on MLK Day.
On MLK Day?
Yep, on MLK Day.
Racist. I was gonna add
I hear you.
else.
Like, honestly, what has become the most challenging part of doing this show, aside from the subject matter, which is deeply depressing, is not being able to curse in response to the subject matter. Now, just to give you another example of how extreme she is, here is another post of hers where she writes, OAN is the best, but is being banned. Newsmax is now Fox News. Fox News is now CNN. CNN is now MSNBC. MSNBC is now Soviet Central Television.
They're so corporate, that's hilarious.
They are getting worse, she argued. She's just like worms for brains, insanely hateful person. In fact, all these outlets that are hateful on their own aren't hateful enough for her. But I want to go to other elected lawmakers here, because this is a huge problem that we're starting to see with mainstream Republican lawmakers, including Elise Stefanik from New York. So she has pushed the white replacement theory, not by name. She uses the same language in some of her political ads. A series of Facebook ads published in September of 2021 by Stefanik's campaign committee charged that Democrats were allowing undocumented immigrants into the United States as a ploy to outnumber and eventually silence Republican voters.
Hey, racist, why don't you try to get Latino votes? What would be wrong with that? Why is a Latino vote any less than a white vote? Racist, Stefanik, you racist piece of crap. What are they replacing? What difference would it make if you were serving all of your voters? But you're saying, oh, no. If we have more Latinos or any other blacks or any other group, they would be replacing us. Who's us, Elise? Who's us? White people, you racist. Oh, are you gonna cry because I called you racist? You're not gonna cry about the 10 people massacred the other day, but I guarantee you when we accurately show you how racist you are, then you're gonna say, oh, I'm the victim. No, by the way, Elise Stefanik was a very corporate, normal Republican.
Yep.
She became the #3 Republican when she raised her hand and said, I'll hate immigrants. I'll be as racist as any of you. And they said, congratulations, Elise. You're now promoted to #3 in the Republican Party in the House.
Yeah, and she referred to immigrants coming into the country as a permanent election insurrection.
Why would it be an insurrection? Why don't you get their votes? Why wouldn't Republican ideology be deeply appealing to new immigrants? Pull yourself up from the bootstraps, work really hard. I mean, that seems like classic Republican, if you believe it, mythology and classic immigrant way of thinking. Oh, they're not right for you guys because they're not white. That is the only reason. And you're saying, I'm not saying it, you're saying I don't want the immigrant votes. Oh, they're gonna replace us good white people. They're okay. Anyone debating whether the Republicans are racist is either a total and utter fool or is lying to you on purpose.
And Matt Gaetz, he's one of the more dopier right-wing politicians, and he did use the words. This was in 2021 specifically to defend Tucker Carlson, who spews white replacement theory garbage on his show on a regular basis. Matt Gaetz defended him by saying Tucker Carlson is correct about replacement theory as he explains what is happening to America. The Anti-Defamation League is a racist organization, he argues.
Yeah, so ADL is fights against anti-Semitism, and they are trying to protect Jewish Americans from fascists. And the fascists are deeply bothered by it. And they say, no, it's the Jewish organization that's racist. It's us good white people who don't want to be replaced by immigrants brought in by Jews. We're not the racists, we're not the anti-Semites. Yeah, sure, if you say so. I'm not debating it anymore. 40% of Republicans say it might be time for violence, and boom, there's violence. Nearly 50% of Republicans say that they believe in the replacement theory. They either strongly believe in it or somewhat agree with it, okay? Nearly half of Republicans think that this deeply anti-Semitic, deeply racist theory is just A-okay. Well, we don't want white people being replaced in power. White people should always be in power. And then they will genuinely turn around and go, I'm not racist. You guys are a joke. Anyone who stays a Republican and says, half my party is filled with racist people. Oh, no problem. And this, Elise Stefanik's #3 in the House, no problem. Tucker Carlson, #1 show for right wingers, no problem. If you say that's not a problem, and all the horrible things that Donald Trump has said, calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, saying we should ban all Muslims, saying he can't tell who was right in the Charlottesville case. Good people on both sides, on the Nazi and the non-Nazi side. If you still are a Republican, you love that racism. Just admit it. Be honest for the first time in your life. All Republicans are bastards.
And finally, just a few other lawmakers. There's Representative Scott Perry. He's the current chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. He said during a subcommittee hearing examining migration from Central America last year that many Americans believe we're replacing national-born American, native-born Americans to permanently transform the political landscape of this very nation. Look, it's racism, there's no question about it. But it's about power and the fear of losing power and the fear of what happens to racist white people in the country once they do lose power. They're worried about reaping what they sow.
As we've said 100 times, don't worry, you idiots. We're not evil like you. You people are evil and immoral. And you don't believe in equality, you don't believe in justice. And all you ever want to do is keep everyone else down under your thumb because you get off on it. That's what sick, evil, immoral people like Republicans do. We on the left have no plan on doing that. Unlike you treasonous people, yes, partly based on January 6th, partly based on the fact that you hate democracy, but mainly based on the fact that you avowedly say you don't want equality, you want only white people to be in charge. Don't worry, we're not monsters like you. We actually believe in equality. Under no circumstances would we ever allow discrimination against white people, because that would be against our core principles, because we're actually Americans. You, on the other hand, you've always been on the side of the Confederacy, Republicans. You've always hated this country and its founding principles. The only thing you liked was the racism that existed before, and you're desperately trying to hold on to that. Don't replace us, we want to be the ones in power. We love being racist, right-wingers in power, don't replace our power. I hope to God that we replace your power because it has been used for sick, immoral, and evil purposes the entire history of the nation, including today. Get rid of all Republicans. They're all bastards.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back for the second hour, we'll switch gears a little bit, talk about the ongoing war on women and their bodies. And I promise later in the show, we will have fun, including, I can't help it, we gotta dunk on Jordan Peterson a little bit, okay? Kermit the Frog, not too happy with a woman with a robust, beautiful body. So we've got that story and more, stick around.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists, as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bitchuation Room. The Bitchuation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week, so join the Frantifa and listen to The Bitchuation Room on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your TYT network podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. And also Blue Star, thank you for joining on YouTube. We appreciate it. They hit the join button below. And tyt.com/join for everyone else. All right, Anna, what's next?
Switching gears significantly, let's talk about a story involving celebrities, believe it or not. So, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial has been going on for what feels like an eternity, and it has sharply divided people in the country, because of course it did. Everything divides people in the country, with individuals either siding with Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. And based on the several days of testimony, the weeks of testimony at this point, I think it's pretty clear that both of them are guilty of contributing to an incredibly toxic and abusive relationship. So I want to make my case here, because anyone who thinks that Amber Heard is totally innocent is wrong. Anyone who thinks that Johnny Depp is entirely innocent is also wrong. Now in this case, Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard, his now ex-wife, who he was with for several years. He's suing for defamation, an incredibly difficult thing to prove in court. However, he's given his best shot. His legal team is pretty, I think, effective in the arguments that they're making, and they have provided some evidence indicating that Amber Heard was also both physically and psychologically abusive toward him in their relationship. Now, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's relationship began more than a decade ago and eventually devolved into what appears to be a pretty toxic marriage. The couple split in 2016, but have continued to battle in court over this op-ed that Amber Heard had written for the Washington Post in 2018, in which she described surviving domestic violence. She didn't mention Depp by name, but it's obviously clear that she was referring to Johnny Depp. Now, in the op-ed, Heard writes this: "I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. Now, Depp is suing for $50 million in damages and denies ever being physically violent with Heard. Heard is countersuing for $100 million and claims that she was only ever violent with Depp in self-defense or defense of her younger sister." So I actually want to skip ahead right now and go to the first video, because this was a piece of evidence that was presented by Johnny Depp and his legal team. And it was evidence that showed that Amber Heard was willing to start a physical altercation, to start it, okay? And I think it's an important piece of evidence. Let's take a listen.
I said to Travis, I said, hey, tell Travis what just happened.
You told me to do it. You told me to. You said, go do that.
I said, no, tell him what just happened.
And I lied.
And that you punched me in the thing. And
you figured it out.
And you said, no, I didn't. What the are you talking about? And I watched you lie. And then
I didn't punch you, by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, you've been in a lot of fights. You've been around a long time. I know. Yeah.
No. Have a close
you didn't get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not deck you. I hitting you. I don't know what the motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
Other things that were revealed in this defamation trial was that, she allegedly defecated on Johnny Depp's side of the bed as retaliation. Some pretty horrendous stuff. But I also want to get back to what Johnny Depp did and the evidence that Amber Heard has provided. We'll get to that in a second. But Cenk, I want to give you an opportunity.
So look, this is tough. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got opinions, and sometimes the opinions are related to the case, and oftentimes it's related to everybody's own personal experiences, right? So if you've ever been abused as a woman, you're gonna have a certain reaction to what Johnny Depp did, right? If you've been abused as a man, you're gonna have a certain reaction to what Amber did. And maybe some of the abuse is physical, some of it, a lot of it is psychological. For the people at home I'm talking about, right? And then you're gonna make certain assumptions about those folks based on what happened to you rather than what happened in their case. Okay, so that makes it super sensitive. So if you say, for example, both sides are bad, both sides hate you, right?
Right.
For their own reasons about their own lives, right? And And if you make a relative judgment, people are gonna hate you even more. But I'm about to do that later in this story, okay? In fact, I'll start it right now. So I think both did terrible things, but Amber Heard was vicious. And so she hit him, you heard it on the tape, no question. She threw several vodka bottles at him, severed his finger, and psychologically deeply abusive to a guy who was clearly had troubles, right? And you can blame him for his troubles, or you can say it was weakness, depending on your perspective, etc. And maybe I blame him for what he did, okay? But if you think Amber Heard is completely innocent, you live on a different planet than I do.
Right, and I don't think she's completely innocent at all. And again, it's based on the evidence that's been presented during the trial. And I'm not ashamed to admit that while I'm cooking, I like to have the trial on in the background to listen to what's been going on. And so I have a pretty good grasp on the evidence that's been presented and all of that. But she also presented evidence in the form of photos showing her injuries based on these physical altercations. For instance, she presented evidence to the court, a photo of a bruise on her face, and claimed that he pulled her hair, screamed at her, and hit her repeatedly. During the entirety of our relationship, Johnny Depp has been verbally and physically abusive to me, Heard said in a sworn declaration at the time. But she also said she lived in fear of Depp, saying that he had a short fuse and terrorized her. And he also had, he has a history of addiction that has come out throughout this trial. In 2018, she wrote in this op-ed, and in 2020 audio, I should say, Heard allegedly saying that she hit Depp and then published online. So we had you guys listen to that, so you know about that evidence. Now, Heard's former assistant, Kate James, testified in court this April that when she asked Heard for a pay raise, Heard spat in her face, backing up claims that Heard could be violent. Now later, a libel trial is held in the United Kingdom, okay, over the British newspaper The Sun calling Depp a wife beater. Depp sues both executive editor Dan Wooten and The Sun's parent company News Group newspapers. Depp's ex-partner Vanessa Paradis defends Depp by submitting a statement saying the actor is the farthest thing from a violent person. I'm just giving you a rundown of the type of evidence that's being presented. Depp also claims that Heard put her, I mentioned this earlier, put her own fecal matter in the bed and was physically violent toward him. In November of 2020, a judge actually ended up siding with The Sun. So he lost that lawsuit in the UK. Now, finally, we reach April of this year, which is when the defamation trial began in Virginia, okay? Attorneys for Depp lay out the evidence for Heard's alleged abuse, while Heard's lawyers focus on Depp's past drug and alcohol use, text messages and recordings, claiming that Depp perpetrated the violence. Now, Depp addressed Heard's allegations about substance abuse, saying he began taking his mother's nerve pills at age 11 and self-medicated with substances over the years as a coping mechanism for trauma. He denied ever having become out of control while under the influence. But during the trial, a video Heard recorded actually showed Depp in a tirade, drunkenly smashing cabinets and all of that, to kind of prove that he would get violent when he was under the influence. So let's take a look at that evidence.
We're not even fighting this morning. All I did was say sorry.
Did something happen to you this morning? That's crazy. Oh, you're crazy. You're crazy.
Have you drunk this whole thing this morning?
Oh, you got this going. You got this going?
I just started it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really?
So there's more, there's a lot more. Other things that came out in the case, in another audio recording during the conversation about the Australian accent, Heard appears to mock the idea that Depp might position himself as a victim. You can tell people it was a fair fight and then see what the jury and judge thinks, Heard says. Tell the world, Johnny, tell them, Johnny Depp, I, a man, am a victim too of domestic violence. It's a fair fight, and see how many people believe or side with you. And to be honest, a lot of people from what I've seen online at least, seem to be siding with him in that she appears to have been abusive toward him as well.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you my theory as to why people are reacting that way. Because as you see him, knock the phone away and stuff, it's not like he didn't partake in anything physical. It looks like he did to some degree, okay? And he keeps saying he doesn't have addiction issues. No, he clearly has addiction issues, right? So why the difference in how people are perceiving Heard and Depp? And that includes me. The reason is, he looks like, and you could say, hey, it's making an excuse for him, and I hear you, and it's a legitimate point, okay? But he looks like he's struggling. He's got weakness. He keeps going back to pills and alcohol, ice cream's falling all over him, etc. Meanwhile, she's taking pictures, she's recording everything nonstop, getting him on tape. I mean, they were only married 18 months. And she's goading him, oh yeah, go public with me beating you and see how that turns out for you. Well, I mean, it didn't turn out well for anybody. And remember, he took this to trial. If he thought, and maybe he's an idiot, and that's totally possible, oh, I beat her all the time and she was just doing self-defense, but if I expose that to the whole world, I'll win? That seems less likely. And so from him, bad actions are coming from both of them. In terms of bad intent, it's screaming through from Amber Heard. And by the way, and I'm not excusing what he did. If you do bad things, then you have bad intent, at least to some degree, okay?
Yeah.
But I think calling it even is also not fair.
Look, that's the thing, I don't know. I don't know if it's even, right? Because, she has provided evidence of her injuries, bruises and all of that. But we weren't there and we don't know the details of how it started. Did she, and look, there has been evidence, obviously, and we presented it to you guys right now, showing that she has started physical altercations, right? So I don't know for sure if he has started physical altercations or if she has gone out of her way to spark it. You know what I'm saying? And he tried to defend himself. We don't know.
I want to be clear though. If he actually caused the bruises, that is a massive problem. That's not a little problem, okay?
Yeah.
And we cannot have that kind of domestic violence. Then I would say, yeah, they're both equally at fault, right? But she recorded everything. And so she has the pictures of the bruises. And by the way, if you're getting abused, you should record things, okay? But if you start the fight and then start the recording, that's a completely different issue, okay? But it's so hard to tell. And so I guess we're gonna leave it up to the jury. And by the way, the jury's not gonna decide who's right and who's wrong. They're gonna decide whether she defamed him. That's a completely different thing.
And to your point, and I said this earlier, defamation suits are incredibly difficult to win. If you're the one bringing the suit. And honestly, watching it, it's such a painful process to go through. And the fact that he's putting himself through it must mean he genuinely believes he's been defamed. So that goes to your point. One final video I want to get to, which you had alluded to earlier, Cenk. So he lost the tip of his finger and he testified about that incident. This is the last video, E4, let's take a look.
I stood up and I walked behind the bar and there was a larger bottle of vodka, the kind with the handle, on it. I grabbed that and I went and I sat in my seat again. I opened the bottle and I poured myself a shot, drank it. Ms. Heard was flinging insults left, right, and center, and she then grabbed that bottle and threw that at me. Heat. I felt heat and I felt as if something were dripping down my hand, and then I looked down and realized that the tip of my finger had been severed.
There was photo evidence of that presented in the trial as well.
Yeah, and then they used that against him too. They said, oh, he wrote in his own blood and that's crazy. Yeah, but severing his finger is a little crazier. So you don't get to criticize what I do with my own blood after you caused the blood in the first place. So there's some things are clear here, okay, and other things are opaque. Now, let me clarify one more time because I'm sure that the video will later be used by my opponents to lie about me, including the New York Times. So if he did the bruises, not only should he lose the trial, he should go to jail if he's committing violence and he's starting the violence and hitting her. That is super obvious, okay? And that part we don't know. The violence she started is clear because she admits it on tape, and the vodka incident where his finger is severed is clear, right? So her saying like, I am the lone victim here and I didn't do anything except, start so many of these fights. I mean, physically, anybody can start a verbal fight and etc. No, this is a very complicated case. And so don't jump to conclusions on either side. And it doesn't mean that, by the way, that Johnny Depp drinking and then taking the phone away from her and the things that we see and doing that in a physical way is okay just because he has an addiction problem. It isn't okay.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, more news for you, including a QAnon enabler having a history of ignoring pedophilia and child porn on his own website. Lots of fun, right? We've got that story and more when we come back.
All right, guys, by the way, we had 200 more winners in Food for Thought trivia last Friday. So we're giving away $100 Blue Apron gift cards from us to you guys. That is a true gift card. You don't have to put your credit card info. That is actually $100 in free food. And so we're gonna do it again. Make sure, I'm telling you that in the beginning of the week because you gotta pay attention to the show throughout the week, the live show, and then the trivia is at the end on Fridays for the members. So you also gotta be a member. Good news, a lot of you have chosen to become members. New members right now are Rakuk One, Phantom Rose, and Rebecca Cordani. They all joined. Thank you guys. We can't do the show without you. You're amazing. You're heroes. We appreciate it. And you all can do the same thing if you hit the join button below on YouTube or go to tyt.com/join. Monica writes in about this, the beginning of the show. TYT, come for the news, stay for the rage. Love you, TYT. Your rage is our rage.
Can I jump in real quick? This is through Twitter, but I actually hadn't seen this and I wanna at least mention it. Are y'all gonna include the evidence where Depp texted that he wanted to F her burnt corpse? That's the craziest thing I've heard from this entire thing. I don't know how I missed that, but thank you for letting me know about it.
Yeah, no, I saw it, I forgot to mention it. So his texts were abhorrent. There's no question about that. He appears to be kidding around about how she's a witch to a friend of his in a private text. You could still say, I don't care that it's private, I don't care that it's to a friend, I don't care that he thinks he's kidding while he's intoxicated. He texts the next morning, oh boy, man, was I drunk, etc., right? But if you're outraged by that, that makes perfect sense. You should be outraged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and so, all right, now let me give you more from our audience because everybody's on both sides of this. Naughtiest Maximus says, men are supposed to just take abuse based on social mores, quote unquote, be a man. Domestic violence is wrong whether it's committed by a man or a woman. LB says the bruises she claimed to have were debunked by other testimony. She hasn't been credible. See guys, LB's hitting at something that I'm saying. My sense of it, and it is a very loose sense, I did not follow every minute of that trial by a long shot, okay, is that she has not been credible throughout. So when she says things, it has less weight. If I believed her that he had bruised her, etc., then that's a completely different story, right? And guys, we just don't know. We don't know. We're not even on the jury, let alone having been in the room with them. We weren't, okay? Okay, so Jonathan Scott writes in Super Chat, they claim that they're being replaced by docile, obedient Democrat voters while also screaming about how disobedient Democrat voters are. Which is it? And yeah, the idea that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are planning anything other than a nap is hilarious. Hello, somebody writes in, I may miss tomorrow's main show. Just wanted to point out that we're not only have Fetterman, Lee, Booker, and Oregon candidates, we also have Erica Smith, Nita Alam, Hunt, and Paul Prescott. So that's all true. Those are all amazing progressives. That's on tomorrow's show for election coverage. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. More news.
Recent polling indicates that a huge portion of the country wants to criminally charge women who obtain abortions illegally. So the path toward punishing women for wanting to practice their reproductive rights is underway. And it's very clear based on this Economist YouGov poll. It finds that among all respondents, 19% replied should be charged with murder, and another 24% say that they were not sure, with 54% saying no, a woman should not be charged with murder if she violates a state abortion ban. Now among men, and this is where things get super scary, nearly a quarter, 24% replied that a woman should be charged with murder, and another 25% say that they were not sure, with 51% saying that no, a woman should not be charged with murder if she obtains an abortion.
It gets worse, of course, when you get to Republicans.
Of course.
Because men include left-wing men, and left-wing men don't have insecurity issues, don't have control issues, are not psychotic like right-wing men. So when you turn to just Republicans, among Republican respondents, a whopping 67% were open to the idea of a murder charge, with 35% responding that women, quote, should be charged with murder. And another 32% saying they were not sure, with just 33% ruling out a woman being charged with murder if she violates a state abortion law. Are they not merciful? A third of Republican voters say maybe we don't charge every woman with murder if she controls her own body. Maybe, okay, so credit to a third of the Republicans who are not yet complete and utter monsters.
Well, I would actually love to survey the exact same respondents again, but this time, instead of the topic focusing on a woman's reproductive rights, focus on the Buffalo shooter. The racist believer in white replacement theory who shot and killed 10 black people at a supermarket and injured 3 others. I want to know if these respondents believe that he should be charged with murder.
Now you might think, come on guys, that's, of course they're gonna say yes,
No,
right?
well, don't be naive.
Okay.
That's what I would say in response, don't be naive.
But there's an actual poll that says that nearly half of Republican voters think that the great replacement theory, the white replacement theory, might be true. Some strongly believe that it's true, and some somewhat believe that it's true. That's nearly half of Republicans. By the way, 40% of Republicans say that it might be time for political violence. So violence for them is great. That's a patriotic thing to do. When we murder you guys, we're patriots, right? Including the cops that they killed on January 6th, because they're patriots, right? Oh, we murder women because we're patriots. But everything's 50-50. No, it's not 50-50. The Republican Party is filled with monsters.
Finally, respondents to the same poll were also evenly split when asked whether they agree abortion is the same as murdering a child. This was actually pretty depressing. I mean, all of it is, but 44% say they either strongly agree, 29%, or somewhat agree, 15%, versus 45% who said they either strongly disagree, 34%, or somewhat disagree, 11%, and 11% who were not sure. The reason why that depressed me is because it's just respondents, meaning that left-wing respondents are included in that.
And independents.
And they think that aborting a zygote or a fetus is the same as murdering a child. And I don't know if it's a failure of our education system, which has been gutted, by Republican lawmakers. I don't know what is behind that. But comparing an embryo, a zygote, a fetus to a living, breathing, viable human being is insane to me. It is insane to me.
Well, so that's because the Republicans.
This country doesn't value human lives. You guys know that, right? Like, let's just be abundantly clear. Putting fetuses aside for a second, this country does not value human lives. We see it in the way we handled COVID. We see it in the way we refuse to pass the most common sense gun legislation, like closing background loopholes to make sure everyone who buys a gun just goes through a federal background check. We can't get that done, knowing full well that could prevent countless deaths in this country. We don't value human lives. And for them to turn around and be like, oh yeah, a zygote being aborted is the same as murdering a freaking viable child, a baby that's alive outside of a mother's womb is completely viable. It's the same thing. Insane, absolutely insane. Stop pretending like this country values lives. It just doesn't. It doesn't at all. And if you do value lives, if you do really think that this is a huge problem, then we need better sex education, not censoring sex education as right-wingers in Florida have done. And we need to make sure that contraception is accessible and available for women to prevent pregnancies. But the same people who claim that a zygote is the same thing as a living, breathing, viable child outside the womb are also the same people who want to ban contraceptives.
Yeah. So look, the Republicans are great at muddying the water. So they constantly talk about all stages of the pregnancy. In fact, today, Tim Pool put out a statement talking about how, oh, well, if you went to an abortion clinic at 8 months and then you wound up delivering prematurely, can you kill the child? No, you schmuck. Roe says that you cannot abort a viable baby. So you're arguing in favor of Roe, not against Roe. But they make it seem like, oh yeah, the Democrats. And that's why they did this insane, lunatic talking point about post-birth abortions. How could it be an abortion if it's post-birth? Yet our media is like, I can't tell. Who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. But to be fair to the media, it's also because of deep Democratic incompetence. Nancy Pelosi was on the Sunday shows. They asked her about abortion. Her answer was there was a consultant document that was leaked last week that said things like, you shouldn't call it choice anymore, you should call it a decision. What, they're splitting hairs, a bunch of idiots.
Please, yeah.
Okay, so you see her say, now remember the decision is a woman's, like she's not talking about anything that would actually convince people.
100%.
It's just babble. She's like, guys, she's barely coherent. She cannot put together a sentence, let alone defend us. Neither can Biden. And none of them have the inclination to defend us. So it leaves it to us to clarify things. Guys, when a baby is viable, according to Roe and according to all of our laws, it is then an independent life form and has protection as an independent life form. When it is not viable, it is a dependent potential life, okay? And that's your best case scenario to call it that, right? But sperm is also potential life. Are we gonna murder every guy who masturbates? Because it'll be a goddamn bloodbath.
No, we don't have to murder them, but maybe we consider murder charges against them and put them in prison.
Yeah, now when you say it about guys and you say, hey, well look, your semen is potentially a life. That's the whole point of semen. That is the whole point. They say, oh no, that's outrageous. But the minute it hits an egg, by the way, not when it even fertilizes, not even when it attaches to the uterine wall. Now the right wing is saying, well, that's okay. Now it's a zygote about the same exact size, right? But now all of a sudden it's a full human being and it has all of the rights. And if you dare do anything to it, we might literally kill you, charged with murder.
Right.
Murder in a lot of states is punishable by the death penalty. The pro-life party is actually arguing to murder mothers, and we're just going on about our business as if things are even.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, you hit the nail on the head. The Democratic Party, while maybe a little bit rhetorically, they're outraged over what happened with the Supreme Court draft decision on overturning Roe. they're excited. Like they love that they're fundraising off of this.
Yeah, what did Pelosi talk about? Did she talk about zygotes? Did she talk about, oh my God, these monsters are thinking about charging women with murder? No, she used her time to talk about, this is why you have to vote for more Democrats. To do what? To do what? To get on TV like you and not make our case? Just talk about me. I want more power. What are you gonna do with it? You're using it right now to help an anti-choice candidate in Cuellar. You're trying to put more anti-choice votes into Congress. That is a fact. Now, of course, none of the reporters asked her about that because mainstream media is in the powerful protection racket where they protect all the powerful. She can't speak, but the emperor has clothes on, okay? All she ever does on TV is babble. You cannot make out 2 sentences and say this is what she was trying to say. Yeah. And she never defends us, never defends her own voters, doesn't defend women, and is actively fighting against women right now by campaigning for Cuellar. But nobody knows. Democratic voters don't know because the mainstream media, their whole job is to protect corrupt, powerful politicians.
Well, let's move on to something different because it turns out that those who claim to want to protect children from sex trafficking don't do anything about child pornography on their own websites. A crucial and early pusher of the QAnon conspiracy theory, a guy by the name of Jim Watkins, apparently ran a site that was infested with illegal child sexual exploitation. Now, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with QAnon conspiracy theorists, they believe that Democrats are part of some satanic cult that traffic children and drink the blood of children, like insane conspiracy theories. But the main tenet, the core of that conspiracy theory is that children are being exploited for sexual acts and sex trafficking. Now, let's get back to Jim Watkins because this report focuses on the moderation of an earlier website that was run by him. And here's what we know. Review of a little-known archive documenting conversations in the moderation channel of Pink, an earlier internet forum, captures Jim Watkins, the site's administrator, pushing for a hands-off approach to the moderation of child porn-related content there. Entries in the archive, created between 2004 and 2018, show he was slow to address concerns about child pornography and dismissed advice from moderators seeking to stop the spread of potentially illegal content. And we've got some examples to share with you in just a moment. But before we do, interesting how the political ideology that goes around calling all sorts of innocent people, including teachers, groomers and pedophiles, has nothing to say about these kinds of stories, right? Not on their radar at all. Not interested in talking about it at all. And of course, these tend to be people who believe in QAnon conspiracy theories as well. In a series of posts from spring of 2009, including one from June, the logs show no record of Watkins appearing on the board where moderators lodged deletion requests for a month. A moderator seeking his help handling the sharing of this type of content complained about the lack of participation in a post they made searching him out on another discussion thread where he was more active. Now, in this post, the moderator offers several potential courses of action to Watkins, including 3 different types or 3 different ways to delete the suspect post, along with an option of frankly admitting he doesn't care if Pink is viewed as dating service or child porn exchange BBS because of the consistent volume of pedophilic sharing that keeps happening. Instead of quickly replying to what many would see as an urgent and concerning problem, Watkins responds, quote, "Let me drink some coffee before I read this deeply." What? So your moderators are telling you that there is content on there for pedophilia, and your response is, let me drink a nice cup of coffee and then maybe later I'll read into it a little more deeply. Subsequent related messages show a similar pattern. Watkins shrugs them off. "I can't seem to solve this problem," he responded in Japanese. "Please tell me what I should do." When a moderator made practical suggestions to Watkins, including proactively deleting any potential pedophilic content, the logs show no response. Cenk.
Okay, let me give you more examples because, so look, there's two possible motives here. One is he wants to make money and he's a deeply immoral, evil man. He doesn't care how he makes the money. The other is that he actually actively knows and encourages it. So the option A is, I'm not gonna moderate because it costs money to moderate. I don't care if it's child porn or not child porn. So that's already horrific, but that's a better option. Option B is, oh, I know there's child porn and I like making money off of it. Well, he had domains where there was apparently child porn, directly making money off of it. So this doesn't seem unclear. Let me give you examples. Now first, on the places he was moderating. A moderator asked Watkins for permission to delete a thread titled "Rape Scene of a Primary School Student." Sorry about the language, but this is what was in the thread. It continues, sperm have a scene in the vagina of elementary school students and gang rape, etc., part 2. Watkins' initial response, I looked at that thread and I don't think it's really what the thread says. There are no links to the pictures, don't delete it. After other users certain the thread contains such links urge him to look again, Watkins concedes his error and agrees to remove it. But the original discussion of raping elementary school students, he thought, if it's just a discussion and we don't have the links to the actual rape, it's totally fine, don't delete it. Now, why do you think QAnon focused on pedophilia? There's two reasons. One is, it's the most heinous charge you can make about someone. So if you say someone's a child molester, you're not having a conversation about their trade policies or healthcare policies, right? It ends the conversation. So its toxicity is the number one reason. The number two reason is because all the people who made the charge, not all of them, but a lot of them are doing projection. They're used to child porn, and so they assume everyone is. In fact, in one of the posts from 2009, Watkins refers to cheese pizza, margarita pizza. That is an awful strange reference. And he's actually referring to that as a code word for child porn. Now, later, if you remember, there was Pizzagate, and it was so weird because they were positive the Democrats were running a pedophilia ring because Podesta ordered cheese pizza for a Democratic get-together. Well, to anyone who's not a pedophile, you have no idea what that means. Why would cheese pizza mean anything? But to pedophiles, they think, they must be thinking like us. They ordered pizza, they must want to molest little kids like we do. That's where the loony stuff begins. So, look, man, if you're a QAnon person, look at the people who started it, you schmucks. And there's more where this came from.
Yeah, I mean, but again, this will just fly under the radar, and teachers who just want to be supportive of their students, they'll get labeled the groomers, they'll get labeled pedophiles, they'll get labeled all sorts of things. By the way, after we did that Rogan story, a bunch of his supporters who got real hurt that I offended their daddy, sent me examples of female teachers, right? Of course, it's all anecdotal stuff. Show me like studies, show me an actual pattern. Like anecdotal stuff doesn't prove that there's an actual trend or a pattern. But nonetheless, a story here, story there of a female teacher, either in her mid-20s or early 30s, having, engaging in sexual acts with one of her students, which I think is wrong, and she should face charges for that, and I've always been consistent on that issue. But it's interesting that Joe Rogan, in one of his stand-ups, specifically defended that. Female teachers sleeping with their students is totally fine. So which one is it? Are they groomers or pedophiles when they engage in that behavior? Or is it something to celebrate for the male students who had sex with the older teacher?
Yeah. And they do this sleight of hand where they're like, well, are you saying there's no child molesters? Of course there's child molesters. There's Donald Trump's best friend, Jeffrey Epstein, who he said likes them young. He knew that he was a molester. The #1 groomer in the country, everybody knows it. And if you're a right winger or you're QAnon, you know it best of all. Ghislaine Maxwell, that was Epstein's main helper. She was the groomer. She would bring in the young girls, groom them for Epstein and his rich buddies.
Trump wishes her well.
And he wished her well twice. While he was president, she got arrested. At that point, we already know she is the leading groomer literally in the history of the country. And Trump goes, I wish her well. But no. When the right wing does it, and it's super obvious, ignore it. It's only the Democrats. Okay, yes, of course there's child molesters in the country, you schmucks. Let's go stop the actual child molesters instead of doing a rando political attack on your ideological opponents that doesn't actually have anything to do with child molestation. So I want to come back to the domain sites that Watkins himself was running. Remember the Watkins, the dad that we're talking about here, and the son, Ron Watkins, who's now running, of course, as a Republican in Arizona, are the guys who ran 8chan and had the correspondence with QAnon. An HBO documentary shows pretty overwhelmingly that it was actually Ron Watkins. And so now back to his dad. Watkins acknowledged hosting the sites. These are not now moderation. These are his own porn sites, okay? But denied that the sites contain child sex abuse material, despite analysis of metadata from several of the domains showing that they featured file names suggesting that they harbored pedophile content like, quote, XXX preteen.
Oh my God.
And
That's
quote,
disgusting.
children, alongside sexual references to girls aged 12 to 15. That was on the sites that he ran and he profited off of. And then lo and behold, the Watkins come up with a theory about how their ideological opponents, the Democrats, because of cheese pizza, are actually running a pedophile ring. It's projection 101.
Totally.
These right wingers are absolute, utter monsters. They do monstrous thing and then they blame the other side for it. So that's what's happening. Thank you to Mother Jones for doing actual investigative journalism. Great job. And everyone else will, as Anna said, you can see, you'll see it for yourself. We'll ignore the story. They won't cover it and they don't make it seem like, oh, are Democrats child molesters? Let's debate at 11. Okay, totally. When in reality, the child molesters are the ones that started the conspiracy theory in the first place. And I don't know that they molested children, they just sold it for profit.
I want to lighten things up, and we will when we come back from the break, starting with a story involving instant karma for racists. We'll be right back.
Back on TYT. So programming notes, old schools tonight. So that's at 10 o'clock Eastern, check that out. So if you watch or listen to our podcast through Facebook, which a lot of you did, unfortunately they ended that program, but you can just go wherever podcasts are published. We're with Acast, but you can go anywhere where you normally go and get our podcast, including The Conversation, which a lot of you are listening to. Unfortunately, when Facebook cut off that option, you're gonna have to go somewhere else to get The Conversation and all of our other podcasts, so you could do that now. And don't forget our coverage tomorrow of Kentucky, North Carolina, Oregon.
What's going on today?
I know, Oregon and Pennsylvania, huge progressives and enormous elections in all of those states, particularly Pennsylvania and Oregon, but also in North Carolina as well. So that's right after the main show. You know the main show is always 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, live, and then at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, we start the live primary coverage. We're doing food for thought trivia throughout the week. You listen to the live show, you become a member, you can win a $100 gift card for free food from Blue Apron. So make sure you're participating in that. And of course, watch This Is JR's show. That's at noon Eastern, everybody check that out. Okay. Pilates Progressive writes in our member section, if the deafening silence of pro-lifers after mass shootings isn't telling of their lies, then I don't know what is. Yes, the pro-life movement, not nearly as bothered by massacres of actual living human beings. Another Radical Dragon writes in about the QAnon story we just did. Option number 3, he actively viewed the child porn and so doesn't want it deleted. That is a very fair option. The era of squirrel politics says, I know this is obvious, but it needs to be said out loud. Thoughts and prayers are not gun control. We don't need more thoughts and prayers. We need legitimate and meaningful gun control. You'll hear the jibber jabber, and Pelosi did it over the weekend. Oh my God, we should do gun control. Really? What are you gonna do? Tell me what you're gonna do. Which law are you gonna pass and how are you gonna pass it? Oh, in order to pass it, you would have to criticize Manchin and your fellow Democrats. Oh, you're never going to do that. So why don't you shut up about it? Because you're not gonna do a goddamn thing and no one understands what you're saying anyway. Dirge says, I wonder if everyone thinks a woman should be charged with murder for an abortion. Believe any man who pays for an abortion should be charged as an accessory to murder.
No, men are immune. Men are immune.
It's, guys, if you make it in a theoretical debate online, they might say, oh yeah, sure. But interestingly enough, no such laws have been proposed. Ever. Okay. Kabuki Dragon writes in, question, when people donate to a Democrat and the donation is processed by Act Blue, is that money pooled and doled out by the DNC? It's hard to take the Dems seriously when they will fund anti-choice candidates over pro-choice progressives. No, it is not. Act Blue is a great organization. They do not send your money to Democratic National Committee unless you ask them to, okay? So it is not pooled in that sense. Don't worry about donating through Act Blue. It's a perfectly good organization. And Ken Jamo just joined by hitting the join button below. Sorry I can't get to all the super chats. You guys are amazing. We love you and we appreciate you. tyt.com/join to become a member too. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Jen Canano with you guys. More news.
Let's do it.
Hello, for Jackie, right?
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, you're like a white guy.
What's that?
Are you like a white guy?
Excuse me?
Are you like a normal guy? Like you speak English? Sorry.
No, you can get out of the car.
The video you just watched featured a Lyft driver by the name of James Bode, who did not take kindly to the passenger who was surprised to see that he was a white guy. But that's only part of what happens. It actually gets crazier when the woman's boyfriend gets involved. Let's watch.
Hello, for Jackie, right?
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, you're like a white guy.
What's that?
Are you like a white guy?
Excuse me?
Are you like a normal guy? Like you speak English? Sorry.
No, you can get out of the car. I'm gonna cancel the ride. That's inappropriate.
What?
It's completely inappropriate. If somebody was not white sitting in the seat, what would be the difference?
Are you serious?
She said, wow, you're a white guy. That's okay, I'm not gonna take the ride. You guys can get out.
Really?
Yeah, completely inappropriate.
Oh, you're
It's all on camera, man. It's all on camera.
I should punch you in the face.
You're gonna threaten me?
Yeah,
Assault.
yeah.
Wow.
Because you guys are racist.
You're
Yeah.
get out of here.
No, I'm calling the cops on you, man.
Go ahead.
It's all on camera. It's all on camera. Do you guys own the place? Is it your place? That's great. Everyone's gonna know. Fossil's last stand for black people, right?
And he did in fact report this to the police and posted the video on Facebook where it has since gone viral. Police confirmed that the woman in the video is Jackie Harford, who owns Fossil's Last Stand, a bar in Pennsylvania. You could hear Bode specifically mentioning it in the video as well. And the man in the video has been identified as Harford's boyfriend and co-owner of the bar, but his name has not been released. And so I really like that story because it's so rare to see. I mean, in terms of like the news, right? I'm sure this kind of stuff does happen regularly, but in the news, it's rare to see a white male stand up for the right reasons, right? And to stand up against racists. And these people do exist, there's plenty of them. And look, that could have devolved into something far worse, right? What if those two decided to start assaulting him? But he was brave, he stood up to them and kicked them out of the car, reported them to the authorities, and I love that.
Just early in the show, as I was raging against right-wingers, I told you guys, do not make any assumptions, and we've said this a million times on the show, based on race.
Right.
Because there's tons of left-wingers who are white and who are wonderful people. And probably the majority of the left wing is white, and they're wonderful people like that. And Anna's right; they're all over the country, but you don't often see them in the news, right? And so we see them a lot because you guys are our audience. Every race, every background is in our audience, and so. But it's great to see it happen in real life and somebody stand up. But guys, so you'll see an interaction like that, and if the guy hadn't said the last thing. And you might not have heard it, so I want to make it clear to you guys what the boyfriend said. A lot of the right wing be like, oh, what's the big deal, man? He got carried away, it's his fault, blah, 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 because they love defending stuff like that. At the end, the boyfriend called the guy an N lover, the full phrase, okay? Oh, gee, I wonder if they were racist or not racist. That comes out of your mouth? Obviously, they were racist all along.
Yeah, so let's talk about Fossil's Last Stand. That's the bar in Pennsylvania that's owned by those two passengers who got kicked out of the car.
Those two racists. Those two racists,
yes. Now, apparently it's known for its questionable clientele and the environment that they foster. So a review of the bar from 3 years ago says this: an okay biker bar, I guess, although staff was complacent to the hostile environment directed at minorities. Sideways comments by hostile patrons were ignored and disregarded by others. There was a bad vibe in the air. Another review says racism earns you 1 star.
So these guys are not subtle.
Yeah, there's more. If I wanted to eat mediocre food made by mediocre racists in a mediocre racist sundown town, I would have stayed in Spokane, Washington. Food is awful, owners are even worse. Yeet this culinary herpes sore into the sun. I don't know what yeet means in this context, but.
Okay, yeah, neither do I. Okay, boomers.
Oh, to throw.
Okay, all right, we throw it away apparently. All right, I almost wish we saved like that last sentence so that you could have all the right wing go, oh, he said, oh, it's not racism, it's not racism. Maybe he just wanted to, didn't want the white Uber drivers being replaced by immigrants, right? And then of course, when he says N lover, you know. And apparently almost every customer that went in there knew. I mean, that's how brazen and obvious they were. But all Republicans will say there's no racism in the country. I don't know what you're talking about.
And by the way, James Bode also, he's getting some sort of they're fundraisers, I guess. And okay, let me give you his tweet. He says, for everyone reaching out and showing support, thank you, I appreciate it truly. But this is the way it should be everywhere, every time. I shouldn't be the guy who did it or said it. We should all be that person. Speak up if you're uncomfortable with it because it makes them uncomfortable, as they should be. And then he says, F racism. And then later, he says to a gentleman named Michael, Michael tweets at him and says, James, I'd like to amplify your act while allowing you to remain somewhat anonymous if you'd like, could you DM me? He says, hi, Michael, I see that you've organized some kind of campaign to raise money. And while the gesture is more than appreciated, so many have already shown similar generosity. I would love if any and all proceeds for your campaign would be donated to the Buffalo victims. Bode's just an all-around great guy.
That's a great guy. So that is wonderful of him.
It's been a dark time in America, very dark time, and we need to acknowledge that people like Bode exist to make sure that we don't fall into this cycle of despair and hatred, honestly, right? And fear, because again, I know we already said it, but there are incredibly courageous, wonderful people out there who are fighting for the right things. And we gotta remember that and join them in solidarity, right?
I'll tell you the part of the reason,
together.
100%, and I love all of that. But part of the reason why we're so animated on the show is because people keep gaslighting us. And is the racism coming from the right wing or the left wing? That's not a question. It's obviously coming from the right wing. It's part of their ideology. So when the mainstream media says, well, don't criticize Republican voters, don't criticize the right wing, their feelings are super important. You don't even call them ultra MAGA. Don't call, oh, how dare you, right? No, I see it with my own eyes. You see it every day with your own eyes. So we're not gonna deny reality. So we're gonna call it like it is. I'm not gonna do kumbaya with racist right wingers. Now, having said that, it's wonderful to see that there are people putting out positive things in the world. And in that case, by the way, he didn't do it with hugs or kisses either. There was a conflict that was created, right? So he stood up when he needed to stand up, but it was just refreshing to finally see somebody stand up for us, especially those of us on the left, because almost none of our politicians ever do it, or any of our so-called leaders. So we need rando Uber drivers or Lyft drivers to stand up for us so we can actually have champions on our side.
Yeah, that's such a great point. All right, bonus episode's gonna be lit. In fact, there's a breaking story involving that Arizona Senate politician, Wendy Rogers, so we'll talk about that.
And we'll make fun of Jordan Peterson, so you're gonna love it. TYT.com/join, or if you're on YouTube, hit the join button below. We'll see you there. Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your